Welcome to Bat Therapy, psychology of Batman, superheroes, and other comic book characters. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We are your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Emilia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources.
Let's talk about Babs.
Yes, finally. All right, so I absolutely love Barbara Gordon. She is one of my favorite members of the Bat family, for sure. I also just love that, like, she's just defiant. She's like, I'm gonna do what I want. I don't really care. I don't really care if Batman wants me to do it. I don't care if my dad wants me to do it. I'm gonna do what I want. And she's also very unique in that she's been two different superheroes.
Yeah.
That's not something that we see often. So, Batgirl, we're not going to dig too much into this. If you want to know more, we already did an episode about Barbara Gordon before when we did The Killing Joke. We touched on her a lot with The Killing Joke.
We also talked with Dr. Letamendi at one point, who was written in as her therapist after she got shot.
Oh, yes, that's right. That was very awesome. But yeah, so Barbara Gordon in The Killing Joke, she was shot and paralyzed from the waist down, but she became another superhero, Oracle, where she was just she was the eye in the sky. She was a researcher. She's extremely brilliant.
I would argue that Batman became dependent upon her. I mean,
absolutely.
I think one of the things I really like about her is that through Oracle in particular, it gets to the point where if she were missing, there would be problems.
Right. And it's not just Batman. The Teen Titans depend on her. The Birds of Prey depend on her. The Outsiders depend on her. And so, like, she ends up becoming the eye in the sky for Gotham and sometimes even the Justice League. Like, she is just an absolute, she's just an absolute powerhouse when she's Batgirl, but also when she is Oracle. And the thing about when she's Batgirl is she is I wouldn't even call her a jack of all trades. She's just top tier at everything. She's a brilliant detective. She's a brilliant fighter. She's fast. She's smart. She catches on to things quick. And it's one of those things that's great because, like, everyone in the Batman family as well completely respect her. Like, even Jason Todd, right? Even Jason Todd, he comes back and he's like, me and Barbara are cool. I got no beef. I got no beef with Barbara. The other Robins, really nice. I got smoked. But even Damian, even Damian, he's like, I'll be quiet.
It is really nice because obviously it's a boys' club, quite literally.
Yeah.
And it is nice how they really do appreciate her. Although I would argue that so we're talking Batgirl year one is specifically what we focused on in terms of preparing for today. So we're going to focus more on the Batgirl side, but there is a little bit that creeps up in there that it's like, really, can we just leave a girl alone? I'm sure we'll get to that. But it is nice how accepted she is. And so in that comic, they mention a lot how she's too short for a lot of things. I'm like, how short is she? Like 5?
I almost couldn't tell if they were joking or not. Like, the way that
you can't be a police officer because you're too short. There's something else. She couldn't be in the FBI because she was too short. And I was like, how short is too short for all of these things?
Also, it's always funny when they have, like, height requirements for things, because I'm like, I feel like that could definitely be an attribute somewhere in that field of work. Like, you know,
like there are small places in which the bulky dudes who can barely fit through a doorway, no offense to the bulky dudes listening in, but if you can barely fit through a doorway, you're not getting through like an air vent. You're not squeezing through the small window.
I had an uncle that tried to join the military and he couldn't because he did not meet the height requirements. He was too short. And I'm like,
okay, so how tall was he?
he was 5 something, but he's pretty short. But like at the same time, I'm like, they could find a use for that. Like that,
You'd think. You'd think.
they could
I don't
find
know.
a
What do
use for
I
that.
know? What do I know about all these things? I'm probably too short. I'm 5'3", everybody.
I
I
was about
might
to
be
say
rounding
you
up for
are.
all I know. I slouch a lot. So
Yeah,
I am short, but I feel like I could be useful in some way, like
yeah.
maybe so it's kind of like I wonder though, too short seemed a little, yeah, like you were saying, it almost felt like a joke. Is that the way of saying you're a girl without saying you're a girl in this set of circumstances?
I absolutely think it is. This is a comic that
Okay.
was written by guys. Like I was looking, and I could be wrong,
Yeah.
but when I was looking at who made this comic, the writers, the artists, the
Yep.
pencilers, all men, all men,
Yep.
and this was 2003, which, in my opinion, is an excuse. But I feel like if this comic were made today, it would definitely be headed up by and spearheaded by women in the
Look,
comic field. At least I would hope so, because I feel like they would nail her
yep.
better. I mean, this
I
was not in any way a bad comic,
No,
but
it wasn't a
it
bad
just
comic. I do think there were
there were little
potential
things,
improvements that could have been made
definitely.
here and there. I don't know if a woman would have been different or anything. I appreciate you as a man noticing that. It's one of the first when I picked up the first one, I was like, this cover looks really cool. All these names look very male. It
Now
was
I
like
do.
Scott and hey, they did a great job. It's
I
nothing
love
against
the
them.
artwork. I
The
love
artwork's great.
the
It's
artwork.
all great. And what, two or three writers, two or three illustrators, or like a someone who does the pen work and whatever,
Hmm.
all male.
Yes.
Let's remember that 50% of our population is female.
Yes.
So comics have been, I think, harder to break into for women probably in a lot of ways. So hopefully, I agree with you. Hopefully, if it was nowadays, there would be more female talent readily available that could
Yeah.
do as quality of a job. Here's here's my thing too though is it's not that I don't think men should be allowed to write up a woman. In fact, that's a really great way of I want you to understand different characters from yourself and it'd be weird if we didn't allow people to look outside of things that were exactly within their own lived experience of life. So I'm not
Right.
saying that men aren't allowed to write women or vice versa. But there are certain folks who haven't really had as easy of an opportunity to share stories, and then all their stories have already been written, usually by straight white men. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I it would have been nice to see at least one woman involved, considering how many people are involved in a comic.
Well, and I think it's one of those things where you look at characters and you kind of want someone from their background to give perspective. I think we talked
Mm,
about it a little bit with how Rick Riordan, like, whenever he touches on other cultures, he makes sure to get people in that culture to actually do the writing
that.
for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it's something that's interesting whenever you look at a comic book character and you're like, okay, I would really love for this to be done by someone that
Mm,
understands them more than the average person, right?
yeah.
Like I feel like Blue Beetle, it should
Mm,
be someone Hispanic, someone with their background writing that. I feel like it gives a lot more perspective. Same thing with characters like Black Panther, even though he like might have been not been created by
yeah,
by
yeah,
a black person. I think it would be very cool
yeah.
whenever they
Here,
step in and write it.
so I agree with you. And here's an argument that complicates the picture, I think, as well though. So one issue we have is over time there have been certain ethnic groups that we blob together. So for example, does that mean we should have Italians write Italian characters
Right.
versus Irish write Irish American, write Irish American, and an Irish person write the Irish person
Then
because
it
those are
becomes
technically different?
segregated.
And
It
and
can
so
be, yeah.
so for the record, I'm of the opinion that grouping all these people into a large group, and everyone should be able to honor their cultures and express themselves
Right.
because in understanding yourself, you can better understand other people. It's tricky because yes, we want these characters represented correctly. We want these character we also want the people who would relate to that character. We want them to have the opportunity to do these things. And then also it just at a certain, like, where's the line, and how do you also allow for creativity? Or like, okay, let's say you're writing a comic, and you've got a queer person, you've got a gay black guy, you've got a bisexual Asian woman, you got, I don't know, I'm just coming up with random stuff.
Yeah.
Do you need a writer for each one of those?
I don't, and
You
I
know what I'm
don't.
saying?
Yeah,
I think it's really important to have representatives and to do your research and all of that stuff. And then also at the same time, I don't want to hate on a really good, like,
absolutely
men can
not.
also write a good female character.
Phenomenal. And this was
Yeah.
and don't get me wrong, this was a very well written comic. I think I was
Yeah.
just a little bit surprised that Batgirl Year One.
Nobody out of the list of 4 people on the cover.
Right. I think
That's the thing. Yeah.
that's what shot me. But I mean, I'm not saying. I mean, I've seen lots of male writers do phenomenal jobs writing female characters, writing ethnic characters like then. So I'm not taking away from this comic at
Oh, yeah,
all.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was just looking at a Batgirl origin story. I thought
Yep.
there would be at least
I know.
one
Yep.
lady in there.
And for the record, once again, I want people to, like, there are a lot of characters that represent people who haven't been able to tell their own stories yet.
Right.
And so I think that there's important contexts as well, in terms of, like, yes, maybe some other people could, like, research and glean from other people. And also, are we making sure to give the opportunities to people who have had maybe less access to becoming comic book writers and illustrators?
Absolutely. And I think,
Yeah.
and it's something that is shifting in the industry.
Yes.
Because honestly, I think at the time, a lot of these comics, it was like, okay, who is it? We're trying to choose the best writers out there. I mean, you look at Gotham City Sirens, it's about Catwoman, Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy all
Mm,
together. I mean, it was written by and created by Paul Dini. And
mm.
so great
Sounds
comic.
like a dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was. But
Yeah.
yeah, he wasn't the only writer. It was I think two other guys stepped in as well to write it. Phenomenal comic. It's just one of
Yep.
those things where I think it's become more noticeable in the times we live in now,
Yep.
where it's like, huh, that's a little odd that that was all
Well,
guys.
and so here's the thing, is that the more, let's say, unique you are compared to what we think of, like, the stereotypical, like, averaged person. So, a lot of times if there's a role, we're going to think of the white guy first in a lot of them.
Okay.
Just because that's been the stereotype of, like, who is in that role. But it's important to be mindful how many things have gotten in the way of other people getting chances. And that's not to say that someone, just because they're white or they're male or whatever, has had an easy road by any means. But
Mhm.
there are a lot of people, especially in an industry where you're trying to represent characters, that you're told you're not skinny enough, you're not straight enough, you're too ethnic, your list goes on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it can maybe be an even more personal thing when it's like, so we're told all these things and we don't even get to write our own characters.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think you're right. A lot of that's changing, and
Yeah. It
um,
absolutely is.
we have to make sure, the writers, the illustrators, the producers, the in all these catchments, do we just have a good diversification
Yeah. And
across everything?
and there's another thing I really loved in this comic as well. Because it is a Batgirl origin story,
Mm.
but they do a good job showing that she is not the only female crime
Yeah,
fighter on
I
the
didn't
scene.
expect them to throw Black Canary in there. That was
Not
a
only did they
pleasant
throw her in there,
surprise.
she was the big gun. Like she
Yeah.
was awesome. She did great. And I also love how they did this thing where it's like, okay, she's not in here just constant. They're not in here constantly talking about men or constantly talking about
Yep.
their relationship. Every advance that Green Arrow makes on her, she just shuts him down. Like, I don't
Yep.
have time for this. And
Yep.
I absolutely loved that. And at the same time, even Barbara, like Dick Grayson clearly has a thing for her, and
They
she's
threw
like,
in a little bit with a cop in there that I felt was unnecessary, that she was like sort of flirting with, and it was kind of weird, but then it seemed like she was into him at the end. That felt a little weird to me. Um, yeah, I liked that it wasn't the center of the story, that it was men. There's actually a lot of plots with women. A lot of times there's, you've got to have your romance, or it's about saving their family, or
right.
so I liked that they didn't have as much of that, but I mean, of
She's like, I
course they
got
had
I
to
got
throw
arsonists to
something in there
catch.
anyway. Yeah, but then in some ways it was pretty realistic that the men weren't leaving her alone.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, I didn't love that, but I'm not saying it's because it was untrue. Maybe I didn't like it because I wanted an escape from that. I don't know. I don't know where my reaction to that
So
comes
I
from.
did not mind that because I always love whenever a new character shows up in Gotham, it always just sets Bruce off. He's like, what the hell is
Mm,
this? Who's in my city? What? They're wearing black just like me? Absolutely not. I don't know this person. What's going on here? I'm gonna keep tabs on. And
yep.
like it's always, but it's always that it starts out aggressive. It's like, who are you? Who do you think
Yep.
you are? And then he sees them. It's like, not bad, not
So
bad.
that's the
Give her a
interesting thing
motorcycle.
here
Let's
is
see what happens here.
yeah, um I mean, he does it in a backhanded, sneaky kind of way. He has
Yep,
Robin
that's what
play
he
good
does.
good cop. Yeah, he can't be straight with anything, but he he catches on that there's something there pretty quick. Now, granted, it's not the first kiddo to cross his path, but I feel like he fought other things harder. I don't know. He accepts her a little bit more from my perspective than some others. Now, granted, she's not as directly under him, but you'd think if anything he would fight that more.
Well,
But he definitely seems to have a respect for the capabilities that he can see
yeah.
in the
Well,
future for
and I
her.
think it's because he sees that even she came on the scene doing a great job. The only thing she was messing up like some of the physics
Mm.
of
Oh
her
yeah, yeah, yeah.
grappling hook and stuff
Yep.
like that. But for the most part, she didn't need help with hand to hand. She beat up
Mm.
Robin the first time they
That was
meet
so
face to face.
freaking beautiful. I loved
Yeah.
that so much.
And
And Bruce loved that too.
absolutely. And so when she's then that's what's interesting about Barbara Gordon. She does not have a lot of weaknesses. She doesn't have
Mm.
a lot of soft spots. And so it was really cool just seeing her step on the scene. And I think Bruce has always been one of those people that like will look straight at, okay, I'm not going to take this personal. Are you a good crime fighter? Are you not? And initially he's like,
Mm.
absolutely not. This is our thing. But then he sees her and it's like, okay, she's doing some really good work here. Like she's actually
Yeah.
doing
Yep.
a really good job. She saves Bruce Wayne. Like when she first
Oh
shows up,
yeah.
that's what I
That was
love. So
great. I
Bruce,
loved that they put Bruce Wayne in it.
yeah, so Bruce is at this gala and getting trashed and doing the I'm a rich playboy thing
Yep.
that he always does. And Killer is it kill was it Killer Moth? Killer Moth
Yes.
like breaks in and she saves Bruce from Killer Moth. I did love that the big bads in this were Killer Moth and Firefly.
Dude, Firefly was scary in
He's
this.
absolutely terrifying. And
Yeah.
he's always terrifying. I feel Firefly does not get a lot of appreciation in a lot of times, but he is absolutely
He was frightening.
terrifying. Yeah, because he
And
was
Killer Moth
just
was like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't have."
yeah.
He was dancing with the devil in the pale moonlight,
Yeah, but
essentially.
yeah, and Killer Moth steps on the scene and I mean, he's a sadist. He is just like I love torturing people, burning people. I love it. It brings me joy to just give people pain. And
So
it's yeah.
let's talk about this. Okay, so Heroes in Training, right? We're talking about Barbara Gordon going into Batgirl. I don't know how specific it was to this story versus others. I didn't. admittedly, I don't think I really thought much about her entry point into everything. So I don't know how much this story might vary, but okay. So she wants to be a cop. She's too short. I don't know. And her dad doesn't want her to be a cop anyway. So who knows if he agrees to anything to be like, oh, tell her she's too short. I don't know. But dad doesn't want her to be a cop, but she wants to make a difference in the world. She knows she can do something and she's very frustrated and she's trying to find this way and she keeps trying all these things. It's not working. Well, she knows that her dad, he sees it as like a necessary evil right now to work with Batman. He doesn't really like it, whatever. So she's like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to this costume ball that he's invited me to that's got like the police and other people there. And I'm going to get under his skin by dressing up as my rendition of Batman to just like stick one to him, essentially. Um, and so then Killer Moth comes and wreaks havoc and she saves Bruce Wayne and, she kind of stumbles into it. And so she actually, I love the whole thought process that you see with her along the way with this whole comic. As we were mentioning, Black Canary is in this. And so actually she never cared about Batman. She didn't hold him in high regard. Black Canary is actually she had actually reached out at one point to Black Canary or tried to try and be like, "Hey, I think I could really do something." Essentially like asking for help to like be able to become an asset. And it didn't really work out right away but she connects with her later. But she actually is much more about Black Canary. Um, doesn't really give two licks about Batman. She just wants to like stick it to her dad. And then because of all this, she ends up getting stuck with the moniker of Batgirl, which also she didn't choose. And there's this little joke of like, I would have preferred at least Batwoman. Which, yeah, come on, people. But think about that though, is you're trying to do this thing and finally you get it, and you kind of gotta go with what bites. It's almost like becoming an influencer or becoming famous, right? You kind of got to lean into whatever seemed to work in that special moment. But now she's stuck being Batgirl, and that's not really how she pictured herself at all.
And I will say in comic lore, I think Batwoman came before Batgirl. The original
Did she
Batwoman
really?
was like the original, I want to say the original Batwoman was like love interest of Bruce, and it was
Ah,
like him and her and Robin just like fighting crime together for a little bit. It was,
mm,
and this is all, of course, like this is all stuff that's like pre-Crisis on Infinite Earths, pre-Killing Joke.
okay.
This is like way back, and so I think because there had already been
Mm,
a character named Batwoman, when she
mm.
came around, they were like, okay, this is Batgirl. I also think when she came around, she was young, just
Oh, she
like
was
Dick.
young. Yeah.
She was young, just like Dick Grayson was, and so I think she was high school, like high school, and
Yeah.
so it was like, oh, Batgirl, and it just kind of showed up
Yeah.
like that. But this is my favorite. This is my favorite thing about her. So we've been doing Heroes in Training. We talked about Tim Drake and how he figured out who Batman and Robin were and showed
Mm,
up and was like, "Can I be Robin?"
yep.
Right? Dick Grayson got adopted by Batman. Jason Todd got adopted by Batman. Barbara Gordon, she sees what they're doing and she says, "I'm going to do that." She's not saying, "I'm going to go ask them to do that." She's just
Ah, yeah.
saying, "I'm going to do that." She's still doing it. She's like, "I'm going to try and contact this league of superheroes here.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they respond or not, I left them a voicemail. I'm still going to do this crime fighting thing.
Yep.
I don't care what my dad says. I'm going to do this crime fighting thing." I She has a superhero. Her superpower is will. Like the
Yeah.
girl
It's like
could be
will and
she
persistence.
could easily be a
Yeah.
Green Lantern if she wanted to be.
Yes, she
The
could.
girl has willpower. She really has such strong will, and I absolutely admire that about her. She steps on the scene, and it's not one of those things. She never really shows like she never really shows this sense of like fear, like, oh my god, I can't do this. The only
Mm,
time you see her scared of anything really is when she's about to get caught, like when her dad's about to figure out who she is. That's really the only time you see her scared. But besides that, I mean, She is that quote unquote strong, independent woman. Don't need no man. Like, I just
Yep.
love that about her, and it's one of the things I've always loved about her.
Well,
Yeah.
and being, I mean, there was Black Canary. There were others out there in terms of her storyline, but she really is one of those foundational female superhero characters when you think about these things. And to be able to do that, to lead the way for
Hmm.
other women or other people and whatever it is, what we were talking earlier about, that representation and where's that opening, and it it really often does take a certain kind of person, and that, like you were saying, that willpower. I would love to see her as a Green Lantern. That's such a great idea. Yeah, it's if you're waiting for permission, she was never going to get it.
Right. And here's another thing that they did great. They didn't just force in a another woman as her nemesis. They were like, nope, she's fighting against
Yeah,
these
good
guys.
point.
She's fighting against these guys. They did not do like, oh, well, it's Wonder Woman, so she needs to fight
Someone
Cheetah
else with
or
boobs.
Big
Yeah.
Barda. Right. It was like, oh, nope. She's fighting some characters that you don't hear about often, but she's fighting some guys that you do need to fear and you do
Dude,
need to
she's
be
starting
worried
with
about.
someone who probably meets criteria for psychopathy. I mean, that
Firefly
Firefly
is
is
unhinged.
terrifying. He is
Yeah.
terrifying in this. I mean, his storyline starts with he's working on a movie set and he purposefully makes it so that the main actress will burn.
Yeah.
And so I think she ends up with like 80% of her body
Yeah.
in burns.
It was really bad. Yeah. And then he
Really
kills,
bad.
he
And
does
then
not.
he goes to try and find worse things to do. So
Hmm.
he um they don't show really any remorse. If anything, they're showing someone who tries to manipulate his partner and figure out, how do we create body counts, how do we create terror, how do we really set people on their heels.
Yeah.
They did not start her off easy, and that's actually a really great point, that they didn't set her against another
Yeah.
female character.
Yeah.
I like that
And
too.
so, and like I said, guys, if you're listening to this, you knocked this comic out of the park. I was
Oh yeah,
just surprised
I
that,
enjoyed myself.
yeah, when I thought about it, that's the only thing. So,
Look,
fellas, I am
and
not
not
coming
to
at you at
make,
all. Y'all
and
knocked
hey,
this out.
we're making assumptions. It just appears by the names that they all have penises instead of vaginas. And
Yeah.
you know, that's
Um. Yeah, and
early 2000s, right?
but it also just shows. But yeah, it does show like what a different world we live in. But this comic, even though it's 20 years old, it fits very well in I feel like it fits very well in this world. There were a couple things that I think wouldn't really fly now, like the sneak kisses without permission and stuff like that.
Dude, you're like going off to crime fight. Keep your tongue to yourself.
Right.
Look,
This is
I
not a
have said I
first
like
date.
Dick
There's an
Grayson.
arsonist.
I know. I have mentioned that Dick Grayson is my favorite Robin. Then later, Keaton has updated me on how skeezy the dude can be. I do not appreciate. Don't don't do it. Like,
Like, yeah.
look, I have had coworkers working at the same job who are married. You don't see them kissing on the job. Like, calm down, dude. And I get
Yeah.
he's a
He's a
okay, yeah,
kid,
he's
but
a
no.
kid, and some people will be like, boys will be boys. No,
No.
keep your tongue to yourself.
No, boys won't be boys. He's trained by Batman. Batman
Thank you
didn't
very
teach him that.
much. Oh, maybe that's what's bothering me so much. I'm like, dude, Bruce,
Batman
come
wouldn't teach you that. Keep your
on.
eyes on the
Yeah.
mission. There's a giant caveman like beast going wild on a train, and
Yeah.
you're sneaking
Now,
kisses. Get out of here, Grayson. Get out of here.
now I will say that the strong, independent woman side of me does appreciate that here is the strong woman, and she's doing all of these things, and she's like tricking her dad into not thinking that she's Batgirl anymore, and she's setting herself up to be the superhero. And then you see like the groveling little Robin, like, I thought she liked me. I did get a tiny bit of pleasure out of that, just
Oh yeah.
because it's showing her as this she's not unemotional. I mean, they show that she gets anxious or she questions herself, or she's a person.
Yeah,
But I did kind of like that flip too, because usually,
absolutely.
you
Dick
know,
Grayson needed to be humbled. Girls love
it
him.
did. Like,
Girls
chill
love
out,
him. And
man.
so it's like, yeah, yeah.
You're on the
You
job.
can be shut down sometimes.
On the job.
Yeah.
Did
Um
not appreciate
but
that.
yeah,
Ridiculous.
but it was just it was a very funny moment, but I love how they handled it. She was like, he's not a bad kisser. I ain't got time for this. I got crimes to solve. Like, it's quick. It's not something where she's constantly just infatuated. Like, what should I wear? Does he like me? Da, 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 da. It's
No,
not
even earlier
stupid.
on, she was like, I think does he have a crush on me? Ew.
Right. Ain't nobody got time for that. They just told me I was too short for the FBI. And here
No.
this kid is shorter than me. I don't want to hear it. Like, it's just
I forget what she calls him too. It's like booties, or that's not it. She
I
keeps
can't
referring to
remember.
his like weenie little robin shoes.
Yeah.
I forget what she calls them.
But yeah, it's
So great.
really
It's great.
it's great, and I really love her relationship with her dad. I've always family dynamics in comic books has always been something that I really appreciated,
Mm,
where it shows like, hey, I'm hiding a lot from you, but don't get it twisted. I absolutely
mm,
love you, because so
yeah.
many times I feel like there's this portrayal where it's like, if you don't tell me every single secret about you, if I don't know everything, then we can't possibly love each other or cohabitate together.
Mm,
It happens all the time. It happens all the time. Everybody has secrets, right? And
yeah.
I really like that there's so many moments here where she shows like, okay, yes, I'm upset that my dad doesn't want me to be a cop. I'm upset that I have to hide this from him, but at the same time I still absolutely love my dad.
Yep.
And I really love I've always loved Gordon and Barbara's
Their
dynamic.
relationship
Like,
together.
I've
Yeah, their
always loved
relationship together is really great.
yeah.
Um, Things can be really interesting when her brother is thrown into the picture. But
All right. At some point, we need to talk about Jim Gordon Jr. I don't know when he
talk about
came.
another terrifying character.
I don't know when he came on the scene, but that kid's built different, and by different, I mean worse. Like, he's just,
His brain is set up in a different way in terms of his reward system and what is reinforced, and
yep,
yeah,
a Jenga tower of sharp
yeah.
objects.
But yeah, in terms of, you were saying something that I really appreciate about family dynamics and love and trust and secrets, and all these things can get really confusing. And actually, this belief that trust is an all or nothing thing is really unhelpful, and it's
Yes,
particularly unhelpful to people with a trauma history. So there's actually one of the trauma treatments out there, cognitive processing therapy. It looks at how, when you go through trauma, sometimes the effect, it hits you so much that it changes how you look at the world, and then how that change then changes how you live in the world, how you react within the world. And so it looks at helping you find a balance between, okay, like the world's not purely good, obviously, because bad things happen, and then also, when bad things happen, that doesn't necessarily mean, that everything's bad, right? How do we
right,
find that balance?
right.
And actually, there's a piece of that. So it goes through some different topics that often come up, and one of them is trust. Trust is so difficult when you've been burned and there are all these things that happen. And a lot of times, what will happen is someone will say, I can't trust anybody, or um, it's impossible to trust people. But if you break down trust, there's a lot of different kinds.
Absolutely.
Like, you when you drive on the road, you trust that most of the time people are going to stay on their side of the line. You might not trust them completely, but you trust them enough to drive on the road. You trust that your mail gets delivered on certain days of the week, or there are certain things that you might trust certain people with your finances. There are other people you might trust with your deepest, darkest emotional secrets, but you wouldn't lend them a dime. there are all of these different ways that we might trust a person, or different levels that we might trust them.
Yes.
And that's why I love what you're pointing out here, because absolutely, she actually trusts her father in a lot of ways. And also, it depends on the set of circumstances, if what you're keeping to yourself or what you're holding secret, if that means that it's unhealthy for the relationship or not. Sometimes it might get in the way of a relationship, and it might hurt the relationship, and other times it might not. And we can't trust everything with everyone. That's a dangerous way to live life.
Yeah. And I love that you bring up trust, because I love that the way that this comic wraps is Bruce is all or nothing in this.
Oh
And
yeah.
so at the end, after they have stopped Firefly, after they have stopped Killer Moth, and even Condiment King, who,
Oh God, I forgot about. I
oh
loved
my
that.
god,
I
what
loved
a
that.
what a character. But after they stop him, he brings her back, and he's like, all right, if this is really what you want to do.
Mm.
And I do love how they kind of showed that, like, Omen, because they definitely showed the Joker, and he had like
Dude, they
his
kept doing that. I
silhouette.
was like,
They
"You're
had like, and
cruel," and they kept
he even looked like
referencing.
him from The Killing Joke, and so it's like,
He did,
oh,
and they even kind of. I forget what it was, but they referenced something that was essentially talking about, like, if your body wasn't working the same way, or there were a few hints in
they
there, like,
dropped the
"Oh,
word
you
Oracle a couple
sneaky."
times. Yeah,
Oracle was in there. Yep,
yeah.
sneaky little buggers.
But I always love whenever Bruce brings someone in. He takes off the mask, he shows them who he is, and
I
he
really
tells
liked that.
them why he does what he does, like
Yep,
what drives him. Because I think he realizes, like, listen, this is why I'll never stop.
you
You
need your reason.
need your reason.
Yeah,
You have to figure that out for yourself. Because now Dick, when Dick came in, it was one of those things like, we got the same things going on here,
yeah,
right? But at the same time, it's like everyone else has vastly different motives. And so even when Batman's training them, he has to come from a different perspective.
yep,
And I think he really respects Barbara in that she just wants to do this because it's the right thing to do. Like,
yeah,
which honestly, in at times, in my opinion, that's more honorable, right? Bruce is doing this because psychologically it's like, I have to
mm,
do this. Whereas Barbara Gordon is doing this, it wasn't from a traumatic experience that drove her to do this. She's doing this because it's the right thing to do. It's kind of like when you see people and it's like, oh, look, they gave $1 million away. And guess what? It's also a great tax write off versus the person that doesn't have a lot of money that's
yep.
giving what they can.
They
Like,
give like
which,
a
right,
dollar, but
right.
it means a lot more.
But it
Yeah.
means a lot more. And that's how it was very interesting the way I looked at that, because when he showed her this, it's one of those things like, she respected it. She absolutely respected it.
Yep.
And she definitely made a joke like, of course it's Bruce Wayne. That makes sense. They're so rich. But
There were a few little, she was catching on, like,
oh
these
yeah.
guys must be loaded. This is
Yes.
expensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's
It's
great.
expensive to be a superhero.
But
Yeah.
yeah, she's driven by simply, I want to do good. I want to help people. I want to fix this city. Someone has to do it. And
Mm,
it'll be me. It's not, her reasoning isn't wrong. Like, honestly, as much as
mm,
I love Batman, his reasoning, it needs some work. It definitely needs some work, but she's
yeah.
doing it for the right reason.
You know what? Something that's striking for me with that is, so like within helping fields, so like being a therapist or a mental health provider, some of us have our own stories and things that have brought us to do this, and some of us, so for myself, I've been very lucky in a lot of things in life, and everybody's got their stuff. Um but for me, I always try and be mindful that I have been lucky in a lot of ways, and I don't want to inadvertently help blindly, and essentially you were talking about, what do you throw money at or how much money or what I don't want to inadvertently be the one saying, look at how I'm helping. And it's really just a surface level thing because I'm too disconnected. Um, but I think very related to what you're talking about, I believe not only in the I have lived through this and therefore I can help others, but also the life is not fair and some of us have been given more or had ways that we've gotten off easier just because that's how life is, and how can we pay it forward to try and balance the scales as best we can to give to others what we've learned when they didn't get that opportunity. And so I'm relating very much to Barbara just in how you were describing her before. And I think it's very important from that perspective to stay humble because we're talking earlier about who's the writer and who's the illustrator, and you can connect to people that don't relate to you and whatnot. But
Right.
Barbara needs to understand and understand the stories of the Bruce Waynes or even the Fireflies and the stay connected. But yeah, I relate to her actually more than I realize now that you've talked about that.
Yeah, she's absolutely awesome. She's one of my favorites, and I love how they at the end they show how Bruce and Dick and Alfred, aka Jeeves, welcome her
Yep.
into the fold and welcome her into the family.
Which I think is a little surprising. That remember, so Batman the animated series, there's an episode where she gets sprayed by the scarecrow.
Oh, that's a
And her
heavy episode.
heavy episode. And her whole fear is that if she dies, her father then discovers she was Batgirl, or maybe he knew all along. I forget that part, but essentially he ends up hunting Batman
Batman.
down out of anger, out of allowing her to do this. And so honestly, a part of me felt like that was a little bit weird of an episode. Not necessarily, but I I guess I didn't see her fear as something that was likely to come true because she was her own person in some ways. But actually, this storyline helps me tie to that quite a
Yes.
bit
Yes.
because I'm like, you know what? Now I see how that could happen.
And
That reality could actually happen if something were to happen to her and Bruce invited her into the family when he didn't need to. I could see that being a problem.
And what's interesting about that too is at the end of that episode, which we'll definitely reference that when we post it, but at the end of that episode, she actually goes to tell her dad. She's like, I'm gonna let him
Mm.
know all this. And he stops her and just like gives her a hug or just like, hey, whatever it is, I trust you. It's okay. Almost like
Oh,
saying, I know,
yeah.
and it's okay,
Yep.
and I love you. And I
Oh,
absolutely love that. If y'all get a chance, read this comic. Batgirl Year One was very well done. It's nine
it was a quick
issues.
read.
It's 9 issues, but it's so good that you zip through it. You can zip if it's a
Is
well
it
written comic, you zip through
I
it
was
so
about to say, like,
fast.
the 9 issues went by fast, so
Yeah,
maybe I don't know what a short read is, but
yeah,
yeah, it went by really quick.
yeah. It was great, and yeah, love me some Babs.
Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Emilia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JVS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.